ToeJam Earl was one of the coolest and funkiest games of the 16-bit generation, of course exclusive to the Sega Genesis, and the first game released back in 1991, and as most of you guys know, I'm one of those older gamers, and so I definitely grew up in that era, and I was a huge fan of the original ToeJam Earl when it released. There was also a sequel called ToeJam Earl Panic and Funkatron released on the Sega Genesis a few years later, and it was an okay addition to the series. I thought it was really just okay. It didn't quite live up to what I thought was so cool about the original game. That being said, now here we are, many years later, 2 decades later, and we have another game in the series, ToeJam Earl Back in the Groove, finally releasing for the current consoles. So of course, as a fan of the original game on the Genesis, I was really excited to see this happening. We live in a world where we're kind of seeing a lot of our favorite classic games and characters and franchises getting revived and having new life breathed into them, and I'm enjoying that. I actually like that trend for the most part, and I think also for the most part, we've seen a lot of these games really succeed. And so when it comes to ToeJam Earl, I had some pretty high expectation. I really wanted to believe in the team behind it. Seemed like they were doing really great, really passionate work, and I wanted to see what it would be like to play a newer, updated version of this really weird, quirky, but super fun fantasy kind of exploration game that started in the 16-bit generation. And so when it comes to ToeJam Earl Back in the Groove, which I've been playing on the PlayStation 4, I have to say that overall, I think the game is just okay. Now, most importantly, I have to say that the game is definitely not bad in any respect. I would be doing the game a disservice if I was to say it's actually quantifiably a bad or an unfun experience, because that's not true. I mean, I have to say that I think the overall style of ToeJam Earl and the style of this new game really shines through. And upon booting it up for the first time, I think I have to be totally honest and say that nostalgia drove most of my enjoyment of this game, because as soon as it started, as soon as that updated remix of the classic ToeJam Earl song came on, as it started the movie that actually has voice acting in it, I was like, oh yeah, man, I'm back in this ToeJam Earl world. I feel like I'm, whatever, in 5th grade again, 10, 11 years old again, and just absolutely in love with this. And it's great. The music is probably one of the strongest aspects of this game, because it's always kind of played on this sort of like jazz funk fusion style kind of feeling, and you know, the 16-bit games did it really well back then, and now of course we can have actual funk music playing, and it's great. It feels just like ToeJam Earl. One of the new things I think this game does pretty well, that was something I wasn't really expecting, is that it actually gives you a pretty wide cast of characters to select from. Right off the bat, you have 2 versions of ToeJam and 2 versions of Earl. You have also 2 of their friends who they've been traveling with, per the opening movie, and then there's even some unlockable characters, and so having a full character select screen I think is pretty neat, and obviously adds a lot of variety. There's a lot of stats and skills for each character to level up, and obviously they all start with a different subsection of all of those skills, and so as you level up throughout the game, you get a pretty unique feel for each of those characters. I am an old school guy, obviously, like I've already said, so I was only ever going to play as ToeJam Earl. I didn't really try any of the new characters yet. And I also, of course, went for the old school ToeJam and old school Earl, because I am old school. Now, I do, however, have to get into some of the negative points, because like I said, this game is definitely not perfect, and there were some elements that have disappointed me. Nothing that totally breaks the game, especially for the awesome price that it's being sold for, but there are some things that I'm not the most in love with. The first is definitely a personal preference, and something that probably isn't a negative for most people, but it's kind of the hand-drawn graphics, the hand-drawn style in the art and the animation. And the reason I say kind of is because, in all honesty, they do look good. It is a good-looking game, and I think they did an amazing job bringing the world and that style of ToeJam Earl to life with a hand-drawn animation style. I think it looks great for what it is. But for myself, I think it's that I just don't really prefer it that way, and I would have loved if they resurrected this series using a sprite-based or a pixel art-based sort of graphical style, maybe even slightly polygonally based, the way Bloodstained looks, that game that's coming out later this year. That kind of resurrection of a classic 16-bit gameplay style I think can also look really great. Here they went for the hand-drawn style, and to be fair, they are not alone. There are plenty of other games that have resurrected their previous franchises with the hand-drawn style. Of course, Rayman has continued that trend. Streets of Rage coming up sometime this year is doing the same thing. And so it's not inherently bad. It's just a stylistic choice that I would have preferred if they did something different, something more akin to a pixel art. That would have been my preference. So that's one thing. You know, again, it certainly looks good. You're watching a lot of gameplay here, and I do think it is a pretty game, so they did a good job with that. But there are just some other weird things. I think the first thing that jumps out at me beyond just the hand-drawn style is the fact that this game, I think, is so true to the original formula of the ToeJam and Earl game on the Genesis that it's kind of to the detriment of the game. And I think that what I learned in playing this game is that the formula for the original ToeJam and Earl maybe doesn't age the best. You're walking around really small, really simple worlds that unfortunately all look the same. There is way less variety in this game than I was expecting, and I think that that also kind of hurts the game, because while it does look good and eye-pleasing, it also doesn't offer enough variety, and I personally got sick of the same island floating levels against a space backdrop over and over and over again. There are some attempts to mix it up, of course. You get some snow levels or some levels where it's dark and there's street lights and a flashlight you have to carry to see around, and that is certainly nice. It's better than nothing. And there really wasn't all that much variety in the original game either, so don't get me wrong. I think that they're just trying to stay true to that. But now that it's been 27 years, I feel like maybe giving a little bit more variety would have made a big difference and gone a really long way. And also, you know, you're walking around, you're exploring, but there isn't much to explore. You're getting presents just like the original game and opening those to have weird little gifts that can allow you to do certain things. You get speed skates, you get bouncing shoes, you sometimes have a bad thing like it's a bomb. I mean, and it's just, again, it worked great in the original game, but in this game, nowadays, it doesn't really add a lot of variety. Honestly, you can walk through this entire game and never open a present. There's no real need to open presents. They didn't really incorporate them in a way that actually adversely affects or changes the gameplay or gives you any sort of boost or benefit to doing it. So the present system felt really outdated and honestly not a whole lot of fun. Also, we have to talk about the enemies, the Earthlings and the humans and all of the things that kind of fill and populate the worlds of this game. And while there is a lot of humor and fun style to it, I actually appreciate what they did because it felt, again, just like the original game, but also still very quirky and new. I found it just kind of annoying and frustrating to navigate around them because honestly, you are almost completely defenseless in this game. And again, that is how it was in the original game, but in this modern age, I think that they needed to adjust a little bit here. And being completely defenseless made it kind of annoying to have to just avoid all of the Earthlings and the enemies throughout this game. And 9 out of 10 times, they're going to be faster than you unless you've really boosted up your speed skill, which happens at random anyway. And so it's kind of entrapment. Every time I came across like some Earthling enemies, I was like, great, I just have to try to walk around these guys and hope they don't catch up to me. And they would almost always would. And they're just kind of kicking your butt as you go through this game. And so it became this really unfun version of like hide and seek or tag, you're it. And I'm just trying to avoid these guys that I can't really avoid unless I'm swimming or falling off the map into the one below. And it just didn't feel organically fun. Or at least as fun as I'd want it to be, I should say. It's a huge part to this game, and it really made it to the point where all I wanted to do was every time I got to a new level, just find the quickest route to the ship piece, quickest route to the next elevator, and just get going. I didn't want to explore. It didn't feel like exploring really made a difference. You know, your search skill, yes, it'll show you where you can try to find items, but none of the items really seem to make much of a difference or impact the gameplay. And exploring doesn't really seem to give you much to find. And all you're trying to do is just get your ship piece and move on. And I didn't want to interact with any of the enemies. It's not like there's great combat. And I don't know. I guess this is kind of just a long-winded way to just say the simplistic style of the original game in 1991 was great then, but making it so true to that now, I think does hold a lot of this game back. However, to bring this back around and end a little bit more positively, I think at the end of the day, I should still state, I did have fun with this game. I know I said it's very frustrating to not have any sort of self-defense, and the present system doesn't really do a lot to the gameplay, and it's really just more annoying to interact with enemies than it is to actually interact or combat or avoid them. It still was ToeJam and Earl, you know, and I still enjoy the world and the style. I think the biggest thing is it doesn't feel like exploring does much, and there isn't a lot of variety to the levels. If they had added more variety than they have, and there was something more, some more of a reward and a benefit to exploring the different maps and the different worlds, getting new presents and using those presents to your advantage, I think it would have been the huge difference maker in this game. But I do still enjoy walking around as ToeJam or Earl, talking to the weird enemies or the weird NPCs, and just kind of getting a feel for the humor, the awesome music. It's just a charming, nostalgia-filled experience. And so, luckily the game is only $20. It's $19.99 across the board, no matter what platform you're going to play it on. That helps the game tremendously, in my opinion. I would say this game is best served for people who are older like me and who have nostalgia for ToeJam and Earl. I think those are the people that are going to enjoy it the most. If you're a younger gamer who've never played them, or maybe you just have no nostalgia for ToeJam and Earl, it's tough for me to recommend. I would say at $20, only if you have someone to play co-op with, would it be worth it. If you have no nostalgic attachment to ToeJam and Earl, I don't think you're really going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it, because it's a little simple and paper thin and difficult in the wrong ways, kind of unfair ways, so I would tell you to avoid it. However, if you're a child of the 16-bit era like me, if you love the original ToeJam and Earl games back in the day on the Sega Genesis, then for $20, I would say yeah, it's probably worth your purchase. It's a small investment of time, it's a small investment of money, and anyone who loves that old classic era of gaming, I think will actually get a lot of enjoyment out of this game. So those are my feelings on ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove. I want to thank HumaNature, of course, for sending me the review code for this game. Again, I played it on the PlayStation 4. Would have loved to try the Switch version as well, but I have not, unfortunately, had a chance to. But I might pick it up separately just to kind of have a portable version of this game. So 16-bit generation gaming coming back in force. I think they made a very valiant effort to try to resurrect this series, and I love the fact that we have a new ToeJam and Earl to play. Whether it's amazing, or whether it's terrible, or whether it's middle of the road, which is more where I fall, it's just nice to have it back. So hopefully you enjoyed. Please discuss whether or not you've played the game, if you like it, if you're thinking about it, if you're not interested. Did my review help you in any way? I'd love to hear that kind of stuff, and that is going to be it. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Live to Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.